welcome to another episode of Instant Ramen. For this one's gonna be a little bit interesting because Oichi's not here today, and it's gonna be me and Mike again. The original plan was to have this recorded last week, just a little bit of time before our upcoming game against Sporting Kansas City in the Open Cup, and yeah, Mike is here joining us again, just to talk to us a little bit about Sporting Kansas City and how they're doing this year, as well as what to expect coming into this game. And yeah, how's it going, Mike?
It's going well. It's great to be talking with you tonight. It's been again after last week, but I always enjoy talking soccer, so pleasure to be back.
No, yeah, thanks again for joining us, or like scheduling this session again, because last time around, everything went well. Up with like a few technical issues, but thankfully there's still lots to talk about, especially when Sporting Kansas City just came out of big, or rather significant, win over of the Seattle Sounders at their house. Definitely not an easy task when it comes to a league play, and yeah, and at least for Sporting Kansas City, there's just a lot to talk about because they're coming off, I would rather say, like one of the worst 10 game starts in league play I've seen in a while, and this, like, which is just like parallel to what Dynamo have been for like the past 5 or so years before the new ownership took over, and and at least to give us some context as to the situation in Sporting Kansas City leading up to the game against Seattle, can you like at least show us or tell us a little bit more about Sporting Kansas City and how they started the season, um,
Sh-
leading up to this moment?
Sure. They were winless in the first 10 games of the season, 11 games of the season at that point. If they'd have lost the game against Seattle, they would have tied Salt Lake in 2007 for the longest winless run to start an MLS season, basically. So it was nice to not set that record. I prefer not setting records for futility. So not tying the record was really nice. But it's been, it's been a tough go to start the season. First few games of the season, Sporting was creating chances, but just weren't able to finish them. And as the season had kind of progressed, those chances kind of started to dry up, started to become less. What you would, for lack of a better term, the expected goals for the chances they were creating continue to fall and become less likely of chances. Basically, they went from having one of the highest expected goals in the league to one of the lowest as the season progressed. Basically, guys just weren't creating opportunities, and it it was almost the complete opposite of what the first half against Seattle was over the weekend, where Kansas City was actually able to create dangerous chances. They just Those chances that they created weren't coming in the first third of the season, basically, for Sporting.
No, yeah, and the situation, I definitely think is way more interesting considering that Peter Vermees is still around with the team, just obviously taking over a couple of roles with the first team, and just like historically speaking, like he has definitely found success, and it just seems extremely odd that at this point, with some of the players that have like are still a great caliber in Major League Soccer, in my opinion, are still in the first team, and and there's definitely like a couple issues that if I can recall, have been happening for Sporting Kansas City for a while now, particularly last year, coming out of like, a lot of injuries, and this year, like this start up until the game against Seattle, as to what the reaction for like your fan base has been towards Peter Vermees. Would you say like people are ready to move on for Peter Vermees, or is it most just like a combination, or like the fault of like the poor results from Kansas City? Is it mostly just a combination of the technical staff as well as the front office, or just like Peter Vermees?
There there's a desire from a large portion of the fan base ready to move on from Peter Vermes. Many of them made themselves vocally heard in the last home game against Montreal last week, and when you could hear, "Hey Vermes, it's all your fault," and just shouting for Vermes out. Just there's a large portion of growing port. I don't want to say large, growing portion of the fan base that is ready to move on from PV at this point. And honestly, a lot of those same people are ready to move on from Brian Bliss, who is the club's technical director. Basically, handles a lot of the player acquisition stuff with Vermes. Uh, Having final say, being the sporting director, he still has final say, but during the season and stuff, Bliss will take the lead on that, I guess would be the best way to put it, so that Vermes can focus on the field portion. And I mean, you even have calls for Jake Reed, the club president, to be gone. Um, we Last time we talked about the Cauldron letter that had been posted the day we did the aforementioned disappearing interview, basically. Um, and a lot of the stuff in that letter was as much about off the field as it was on the field. And Reed handles a lot of the off the field. He's kind of the face, I guess, of that side of things for Sporting. And there have been a growing number of complaints from fans of being undersold on their season tickets via discounted tickets for like a 4 pack, where you get 4 tickets, 4 cheeseburgers, 4 Cokes, and downturn in quality of season ticket holder gifts. Just there have been a lot of growing complaints where when the team's winning, a lot of those complaints get overlooked, but add on the fact that Sporting was winless on the season, and it just brings all of that up to the surface and makes it that much more difficult to justify some of those things that you might be able to look over. If, oh yeah, look over here, the team's winning, don't look at this stuff, the team's winning, focus here. So it's, yeah, it's one of those things where everything's coming to a head with the club at this point.
Yeah, and that's just good to understand because just as a casual fan, just looking from the outside, it's it's definitely interesting to look at the situation and try to understand what the problem is, at least as to why the first team for you guys is not playing as it should, or just based on like the combination of things happening at the same time. And I know, yeah, I do know for a fact that like I still think like Sporting Kansas City is very talented. They still have like I said earlier, they still have the players that can definitely gel together to create that chemistry to create a successful team. But unfortunately, to start the season, it didn't show up like that, and the chances there were definitely a lack of creativity, definitely a lack of at least opportunities being created there, and just as a whole, just being disappointing, even at home, which is a place that's for you guys is pretty much a fortress historically, and yeah, just things didn't start correctly for you guys in the first 10 games, and and it's a little bit interesting also because in the first recording that we did, that was like leading up to the game against Seattle, it definitely looked like a lot of the blame. It was mostly just on Peter Vermes for at least not trying to like shake things up or like do things differently. But obviously, coming out of the game against Seattle, something definitely happened because, um, yeah, just defeating Seattle at their home, it's definitely not an easy task. And I know, yes, it's just I was watching the game like at a bar, like the game was on, and I was just like trying to understand if the scoreboard like showing on the TV was a mistake, but like heading out of this game, like is there like any significant takeaways you want to get from this result against Seattle, or at least like heading into the game against Houston?
I mean, the big thing coming out of the game against Seattle as a whole is simply the fact of how much more fluid the attack was with both Tommy and Kinda on the field. That was, as you mentioned, as I mentioned, that was something that's been sorely lacking a lot this year. Is just some creativity through the midfield, creativity leading up into the final third, because a lot of first part of the season for Sporting had been very stagnant, very predictable in terms of the way they attacked. So like you look at Casey's second goal against Seattle, the almost no look pass from Tommy to pick out Polito on that second goal. That's the sort of line breaking pass, the sort of spark of creativity that the team really hasn't had for the first few games of the season. So while the second half kind of got away from them a little bit, the what we saw in the first 45 minutes certainly should give Sporting fans some hope for what what could happen as Kinda continues to get match fit and we continue to get more out of the team on the field. As for coming up against Houston, um, I like what I've seen from some of the young guys. Somebody like Jake Davis, who has really started to pretty much make the right back position his own since he started there in an emergency situation for Kansas City. He's able to get forward. He has decent pace. He has as a midfielder, at least that's the position he's listed at and where he's played for Kansas City when he has the ability to control the ball, which Vermes likes in the outside backs, especially the ones that get forward to attack. So, I mean, there's young guys that I think will get time tomorrow that have really shown that they deserve it from what they've done, at least against Seattle, and what we'll hopefully see going forward.
No, yeah, and the good thing out of all of this is that there's still plenty of season to go, at least in MLS, and even though like there were a lot of points wasted by Kansas City early this year, there's still a lot of games to go, and this game against Seattle definitely seems like a pretty strong turning point, at least for you guys. And considering that this competition is also another way for you guys to try to experiment or see what works to try to apply it into MLS, or maybe it's a competition to try to focus on. This is definitely something to consider. Also for us, it's kind of important because just based in the last game, we most of our starters were playing in the game against the Tampa Bay Rowdies, which happened to be like a pretty, I would say like a pretty ugly 1-0 win, only because uh, playing all these starters, I was expecting just like the best performance from the team and a lot of chance creations, and we only got away with like a goal that was very well set up, by the way, and it was just like just disappointing to see because like the Rowdies were just in pretty much the game, um, pretty much throughout the second half and a good chunk of the first half, and for me, it was a little bit upsetting. I was still glad we got the win, but at the same time, I expected more of this team. And just heading into this Open Cup against Kansas City, Ben Olsen pretty much just alluded into the opportunity, or rather, just the potential chance that we'll be seeing less first teamers compared to the last Open Cup game. And at least for me, it's just good, only because we do have that home game coming up against Seattle, coming off that loss against Kansas City, and I was just interested to see if there's gonna be really emotional or just salty about that result, and just try to like take it all out on Houston. But still, I definitely see us having less first teamers compared to the last time out, and there's definitely like a couple of things that Kansas City can try to capitalize on Houston, particularly the flanks, which has been like a pretty um, significant weakness for the team to defend against, and just those creations like created on the flanks. If you can try cross something, and if you catch us off guard, you definitely have a chance there. And yeah, Houston just likes to be patient with the ball. If there's like a way that you guys can find to like apply like a high press, or try to see if you can like find coverage for like all the players just sitting back and wait for the ball. There's another opening there as far as I've seen this season. So there's like a couple things that I can try and guess what may happen tomorrow. And obviously this is dependent on what the lineup's going to be next tomorrow, because like I said before, we may not see the starters, and most of the starters that I've been seeing so far, uh, I've pretty much just been in league play, so things might be different again. So, would there be like a couple things you want to say, or at least to look out for this team, like hitting into this game? It kind of sounds like the last question, but I just find it interesting, like depending on
No,
what you see in your lineup
yeah,
for this game.
yeah. I mean, I don't think like so against Tulsa Athletic, we threw out a number of first teamers: Polito, Shallowy, Voltaire. Just a number of guys did get starts in that game that you probably in other situations you probably wouldn't. But at the same time, Vermes was trying to kind of get anything going for the team, and throwing more first teamers out against a semi-pro side seemed to not bad idea to try to get something going. But I would expect fewer starters for Sporting than they played against Tulsa. I would still expect a couple in there. But Sporting plays basically the rest of this month. Sporting plays Wednesday, Saturday with league games. So I would expect a fewer first teamers simply be to try to manage minutes on legs for older players at this point. I mean, I think you'll see. I think Pulskamp, who started the season in goal for us, is going to probably get the start. I think you'll probably see the center backs rotated with Volader and Castellanos in there. Um, I think won't surprise me if Voltaire is starting again because he just always seems to start for us. But I think you'll see quite a few changes to the lineup. You talked about the attacking the wings and Houston being a little susceptible to the high press. Those are two things that Vermes would probably love to hear. The high press has been, while not as apparent for Kansas City as it's been in years past, is still something that is very is utilized from time to time from the club. They'll defend from the front. That's something Vermes likes with his front three, to be able to press and be able to be the first line of defense basically. And I mean we talked about the creativity in the midfield against Seattle and how that opened things up, but for up until that game, Kansas City's attacks have always gone down the wings through Russell and Shallowy. So it'll be interesting if Kansas City goes back to that a bit more, because I would be shocked if Kinda plays tomorrow night. I'd be shocked if he traveled, since they're still trying to manage his minutes. And Tommy, I could see him on the bench, but again, with the schedule load ahead for Sporting, I wouldn't wouldn't want him to start. I would want to have him be rested and ready to go Saturday against Minnesota.
No, yeah, and one of the things, or at least some of the players that I can definitely see playing for this game, and like I said earlier, there's definitely a good chance we're gonna rotate a lot because we do have a pretty tough game against Seattle coming up. We and the last game against Russell Lake, which was a scoreless draw, it was a pretty good opportunity to see defender or like a center back, Mikael, getting the start, and that just happened only because Teenage Adebi, which is our first choice center back, is his position, did suffer an injury earlier last week, and he's gonna be gone for a while. And Mikael, he was recently signed to a deal from Dynamo 2 to pretty much just cover that position, and I definitely thought he did pretty well. As to the question of if he's going to start this game against Kansas City, there's definitely a good chance. I don't know if he's going to be um, pretty much just saved over or just carried over for the game against Seattle. There's definitely a good chance that's the case, but um, we still need that experience. And Eric Svechenko, if he comes out of that injury, may be able to cover that position, but he's still questionable based on the latest injury report. So there's still that chance that Mikael might get that starting spot either way. And Ethan Bartlow, he's been also like our first choice center back for like a good chunk of the season by now, and he's coming out of a pretty bad injury last year. He barely played last year. I believe he was mostly just because of a concussion or just a related injury there. But since then, he's been playing every game. He's been very great so far, and I just enjoying him play. So there's definitely I can definitely see him there. The main question marks though is the fullbacks, only because we are down a few already due to injuries, and Escobar is definitely an option. I can see that happening still. As for the next one, it might be Van der Kast again, or we might see a new signing like Gasper. I keep forgetting his first name, but Gasper. He
Oh,
was
Chase Gasper.
Chase Gasper. Thank you. And yeah, he was featured against in the game against Tampa Bay Rowdies, and he hasn't played significant minutes still. So there's definitely a choice there. Midfield wise, we can definitely see some a lot more adjustments there. Definitely, we're gonna see a Booking Rain starting again there, and that's usually how it goes because he definitely earned those first 15 minutes, and he's gonna get all those minutes for sure in the Open Cup, and soon enough in MLS. And the main question being that the Dynamo have been finding a lot of success with Achacha and Arthur starting at the same time, and even Coco. And I think it might be like a mixture of one or two of those players starting for this game. We might be resorting to bench players here, but it's still I think it's just one of those things that we will be taking into consideration before heading into this game, only to save those players for the game against Seattle. The big question mark though, aside from midfield, would definitely just be the forward line because it's been a combination of trying to figure out what's wrong or at least what Ben Olsen has already seen is that like even though our main nine or at least got Corey Bear starting over our designated player striker Sebas Ferreira, like he just wants Corey Bear to defend, and he likes how he plays. Like even though he's not scoring the goals, and this past game against Russell Lake, he's got like plenty of opportunities and he didn't score those, and he's kind of like a meme at this point because he keeps getting the starts, but he's not scoring, and people are mad about it, and he's only getting a couple assists now and then, so it's kind of like he's he's contributing to the game sometimes, but he's not scoring goals like he's supposed to. So it's just like a big debate going on, and not just in the starting nine, but also like on the wings because we're still trying to see what works consistently because our newest one of the newest signings, Ivan Franco, he's been getting like a lot of starts at the beginning of the season, but now he's been like coming off the bench. So this might be like another opportunity for him to prove himself if he gets a start. I do see either him or Quinones starting as well. Like Quinones is one of our wingers like on loan that we still have. He might get a shot here, and Basi, I don't. He might start here. Definitely, he's going to be one of our weapons here, and I will definitely, or at least like start him and save some minutes for the Seattle game because he's still very useful for us. And I w- I want to really want to say Ismail Aliyu, our newest signing coming out of the Croatian first division. Like I don't know if he's going to be debuting here only because he's still training with the team. I think he started training this week, so that's pretty much a long shot at this point. But I like to see him play it eventually. But yeah, it's just one. The main reason why we're out the forward line is because even though like production wise, like they're doing what Ben Olsen wants them to do for the most part, we're still lacking those like goals, or particularly those like goals from open play, because we're still getting goals in certain ways, particularly penalty kicks like early on. Like Boss is definitely bringing those, but the main worry is pretty much just scoring those goals to put the game away, like a normal soccer game. And it's just one of those things too that that's been like up to debate, particularly the forward line, because like we do see that like the big picture already. Like midfield's doing fine. Defensively, we're still building things up. We're also doing fine, and the forward line is the one that has to step up at this point because like it's kind of like a weird blurry picture as to see what if it's something works or not, and at this point it's just like we might have to switch pieces around, particularly the newest signings, to see what works. And yeah, like it's just a mess so far. But I feel like they can get they still have, I'll just say a couple games until they solve this, and I definitely trust Ben Olsen at this point to figure it out. But yeah, it's just weird how we're in this situation now, even though we're in a pretty good position in the league standings. Like even though we're in the mid table, it's definitely better than what we have been going through for like the past 10 years now. So I'll definitely take it as it is for now.
Well, you were describing Corey Baird's play for you, and I just couldn't help but picture the same debate Kansas City fans have with Kyrie Shelton. Defensively, does everything that Vermes wants him to do up there, but can't score a goal to pretty much save his life at times. It seems like, but it was it was eerily familiar hearing you talk about Baird and thinking that's just are you sure you're not describing Kyrie Shelton, because
Yeah.
that sure sounds like Shelton for us, because it's the same thing. And I mean it's been less so this year simply because Shelton hasn't gotten as much time, but it was a lot. I don't even think by the end, by the time Kansas City got Willie Agata in last year and finally got him integrated and starting, I don't even think there was a debate in the fan base anymore. Everybody just wanted. Shelton's a great guy, but he's not a starter at the number 9 in MLS. He's just not. And by the time Agata came in and took over the starting position, everybody was kind of ready to be done with Kyrie Shelton as a starter for Sporting. So it was it's good to see that Kansas City fans aren't the only ones that are dealing with that sort of frustration. I guess is the point.
No, yeah, and I figure certain teams will be in the same troubles, but it's just like interesting how like Kansas City maybe sharing like a couple elements from Dynamo and this situation in particular. I think it's funny because we're kind of still sorting things out there, and you guys are as well. And I feel like this game is gonna be trying to still find those solutions at least for depending on what the lineup's gonna look like. Definitely, it might help each team like find a solution that might prove to be either consistent towards what they want to apply in the long run, like as the season goes, or kind of like a plan B to see if it's something that, like under the right circumstances, it can work. Like or like just facing like a different team per se. And I guess to close things out, if you can pretty much just tell us how, like just following the Dynamo, like I started following them for like almost 10 years now, and like over 10 years, and just like the past almost roughly 10 years now, it's just been like really depressing for us up until we got like a new ownership, and we're still turning things around, and just like in the past decade, it's definitely like a different story for Kansas City. But if there's like a way you can tell us like how you got started following or like supporting Sporting Kansas City, and how you look forward to things for the team.
Sure. So I actually started supporting Sporting back when they were still the KC Wiz. My parents took bought season tickets for the first season, and I was actually at the first game. And I mean, my parents are still season ticket holders. They are one of a handful at this point that have been from '96 all the way up to now. I've been season ticket holder on my own since I graduated college, so I'm going on 20 years as a season ticket holder myself. It, it's it's one of those things where I've always felt that I needed to support the local game. I guess I grew up around Kansas City. I went to a few original KC Comets games back in the 80s that my parents tell me about. I went to KC Attack games in the mid 90s with the same with the Wizards. So I've always enjoyed supporting local teams, basically. And I mean, it sounds cliche, but that's how you grow the game is you have to support local soccer, whether that's MLS, whether that's the MASL, where the indoor team now plays out, whether it's the Current, who you brought up the Dash earlier. Supporting local soccer is the best way to get the game to grow, and so I don't see a reason why I'm not going to support my local team and cheer them on. So I mean that's how I've got into supporting Kansas City. Um, I got more involved after studying abroad in Europe. I came home and was enamored with having been in the atmosphere in England for a while, and decided I wanted to be more involved with locally. So I decided to try to get more involved there and just not, I don't want to say bring the atmosphere from there because you can't really do that, but just invest in my team the same way I saw people investing in when went to West Ham or went to Charlton or went to Manchester, and just went to all those different places and saw how people were so invested in their team that I wanted to get that much more invested locally in my team, because Kansas City's my team. Kansas City's where I'm from. So that's what I wanted to do and why I'm still a season ticket holder today. And I mean, from from my perspective, the Sporting KC era of Kansas City has been, I mean, nothing but success for the most part. I mean, we're and honestly, I guess you could go back to the Wizards days. Kansas City right now is in its longest trophy drought in club history at this point. Our last trophy was the 2017 U.S. Open Cup. So so we've had, compared to many teams in MLS, we've had a good history of success at this point. And I mean, it is beyond frustrating to see what's happened with the team over the first third of the season, and I I have to hope that the Seattle game this past weekend was our turnaround point. Whether that's continuing to kind of scrape along in league and make an Open Cup run, or whether that's start to raise our game in the league as well. It just, I have to hope that that's going to be the turning point, or this is going to turn into a very long season for Sporting.
No, yeah, and pretty much what I can attest to what you said is definitely just how we support soccer, especially in the U.S. Like even though it definitely catches its own flag, particularly MLS and NWSL being like single entity and all that. Like it's pretty much what we got, and obviously we still have like the USL, UPSL, the lower division teams, Anisa as well, and there's definitely like a lot of options out there, like particularly in this country, and just by like supporting either of those teams in all those leagues, it's just good enough, and just by and just like that, having that sense of community of like other people just catching the games along with you is definitely good. And particularly for me, when I started following Dynamo, it was kind of like a similar feeling. Like even though I didn't start following the team since the team began back in 2006, and I still felt part of the community. And even though I pretty much started following the team, kind of when like the downfall began, because historically the Dynamo were just going to the playoffs every year, and we're now like we've only made playoffs once in like the last 8 years, 9 years now, and it's just disappointing to see how like that type of history changed, mostly just because of our previous ownership and general managers like own negligence. And now we're still turning things around. I'm pretty hopeful about that. But yeah, just that sense of community and just sense of belonging in the stands, and also just being with like knowing or like getting to know new people like in pre games or like bars and all that, especially for like outside fans. It's just like that sense of community like in that we have like as a I wouldn't say like a soccer nation, but rather like a country that's starting to follow soccer, and it's still like a long way to catch up, or like up to like the big sports in the country. And it's there, like you just have to like find it at this point. But I feel like when it keeps growing and growing, it's going to get to that level that we see in Europe. Not necessarily the same one as in that continent, like you said, but it's the sport itself is increasing popularity, and it's just going to be a matter of time until we have like just people casually following the sport, just catching the game on TV because it's there. And no, yeah, it's just good, and I'm just thankful of like the amount of people that I've met along the way because of that.
Oh yeah, Absolutely no. Yeah, you brought up the fact of compared to the other leagues, and I mean, you can't you can't really compare MLS in the that level to the NBA's, the NHL's, you, because simply because those leagues have 75 100 year histories that they're building off of. MLS is barely over 25 at this point. I mean, I think this is something that I said in the broad portion we lost, but I look at it from the aspect of my parents took me to games when I was kids. When I was a kid, my parents took my brothers and I to games. I'm now taking my kids to games, and hopefully, as they grow, they'll bring their kids, and that's how you build that level of support. That's how you build that sort of fan base is through the generational building, not just here, but in Europe as well. I mean, again, last time we talked, I think I spoke of a tifo that I saw Dortmund do years ago, where it was a father and a son on the terraces watching a game together, and it said like I can't even remember the phrase, but it said something about the support through the generations was the gist of it, and you're just starting to get that sort of thing. I mean, the people that were around when MLS started that are, I mean, I was 13 the first year of MLS that I was going to games. I'm now obviously math wise I'm in my 40s now, so and I have kids that are going to games with me, and so you have that first generation that were taking to games as kids that are now bringing their kids, and they're building that fan base, and so we're barely at the base of where fan support for soccer can be at this country, because we had the first set of fans that bought season tickets that brought their kids, and now you're getting that second level where you have the kids that are now season ticket holders themselves, and they're bringing their kids or they're bringing their friends who weren't going to games, and they're building that next layer, and that's how you get those levels of support. Is just it takes time, and I think a lot of people want to jump ahead and be like, oh, we need to jump so many levels, and a lot of that support doesn't come until you get that strong base, and that's where MLS as a whole really still is still getting a solid base. They're building up, but they're still building that base as well.
No, yeah, and there's definitely a lot of truth in there in pretty much everything you said. And yeah, it's just like a while until we see the game like be at the level of like other sports leagues in the country. No, but yeah, Mike, thank you so much for your time. And before we head out, can you tell like everyone where to find you, like at least the social media or at least the platforms you cover for Sporticast City?
Sure, absolutely. I write for the KC Soccer Journal, which is the former SB Nation S- Sporting Kansas City / KC Soccer blog, the Blue Testament. We're now KC Soccer Journal. I can be found on Twitter at Down the Byline. At Down the Byline is my Twitter handle. Um, I like talking stats. I like posting a lot of random stats for Sporting, the current, all the local Kansas City soccer. Um, those are the main things I like to do. I love tracking the former players. I love keeping track of like Shea Groom, who plays for the Dash now, Isaiah LaFleur, who plays for the Dynamo 2, came up through the Sporting Academy. So I like tracking all the guys who came through Kansas City in one form or another. It's fun to track them. So it's yeah, I just enjoy all things soccer basically, but I try to narrow down to Kansas City, or else I would have no life outside of that. And I kind of like to watch my kids play soccer sometimes. So, but that's where you can find me.
No, yeah, yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, I've followed your tweets constantly, and I just keep seeing you like tweeting those interesting stats from like players and all that. And yeah, it's just pretty cool that you do that. Kind of like what I do, but I'm still kind of working on that. But yeah, and no, Mike, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, even though OSU isn't here, he's still here in spirit. And yeah, I'm just he would have been like throwing like maybe some jokes here and there, and yeah, we'll miss him for sure. But he'll be back soon. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning into this episode of Instant Ramen, and we'll catch you later.